I keep thinking about this whole thing with Britt and the Huntington diagnosis, and honestly, the more I replay it in my head, the less it makes sense in a straight line. General Hospital spoilers are teasing that Britt might not even have Huntington at all. And I know that sounds wild, almost too convenient, but this is Port Charles we are talking about. Not a quiet little town where medical charts stay untouched and villains retire peacefully. First of all, let's go back. Fans saw the symptoms years ago, maybe around 2020, maybe 2021. Time blurs a bit. Britt's hands were trembling, small at first, subtle. The kind of tremor you could blame on stress, caffeine, too many sleepless nights. But this is Britt. She is a doctor. She knows what neurological tremors look like. She panicked, and I think anyone in her position would, because her father is Faison, and Faison had Huntington. That shadow never really left her, did it? When your father carries a genetic death sentence, you grow up with that ticking in the background, even when you pretend you do not hear it. She went to a medical facility with Jason, and the test results came back positive. That was the confirmation, the official stamp. You have Huntington. And from that moment on, Britt started living like a woman on borrowed time. That changed her. It changed how she loved, how she pushed people away, how she accepted her own fate almost stubbornly. I remember thinking back then that the diagnosis felt too neat, too clean. In General Hospital, nothing medical is ever just medical. There is always a lab tampered with, a sample switched, a result altered by someone with a bigger plan. Now, spoilers suggest she might not have Huntington at all, and here is where my mind starts spiraling. Because if she does not have it, then what were those tremors? Were they induced, drug-related, engineered? That sounds insane, but again, this is the same universe where people come back from the dead with suspicious frequency. Enter Cullum. Cullum is supposedly interested in Faison's final project, that so-called cold synthesis project. Or maybe it is something else entirely. Some hidden scientific research Faison kept buried under layers of misdirection. Faison was never just a madman throwing darts in the dark. He was calculating, obsessive. If he had a final project, it was not random, it had a purpose. Cullum is described as being aligned with Sidwell, but honestly, I do not see them as equals. Sidwell feels like muscle, or at least like someone who operates on visible ambition. Cullum feels colder, quieter, more strategic. If anything, Sidwell seems like the subordinate, the man who handles logistics, while Cullum thinks 10 steps ahead. That is just my read, but I cannot shake it. And then there is Britt, again, caught in the middle. We are told that Britt is being controlled by Cullum through Huntington medication, that without this medication from Cullum, she would die, that she must maintain a strict treatment schedule. But here is the thing that bothers me. Huntington does not have a cure. There are treatments to manage symptoms, yes, but nothing that magically keeps death away like a timed antidote. So why is Britt dependent on Cullum's supply? Why is her survival seemingly tied to him? What if it is not Huntington medication at all? What if Cullum created a condition, induced symptoms that mimic Huntington, gave her drugs that both cause and suppress those symptoms, a manufactured illness with a manufactured treatment? It sounds twisted, but it would be the perfect leash. You convince someone they are terminally ill, then you become their only lifeline. They will do almost anything to keep breathing, especially if they already believe their fate was sealed by genetics. And speaking of genetics, Britt carries Faison's DNA. That is important. If Cullum truly took over Faison's final research after Faison's supposed death, then Britt is not just a grieving daughter, she is a biological asset. If the project requires specific genetic markers, something inherited, something rare, then Britt becomes central, not optional, essential. There is speculation that Cullum might have been Faison's secret student. That detail fascinates me. Faison was the type to groom proteges in secret, to pass on knowledge like a twisted legacy. If Cullum learned directly from him, then this is not just about finishing a project. It is about honoring a master or surpassing him. And Nathan. Let's not forget Nathan's resurrection, because that cannot be random either. If Cullum brought Nathan back, that is leverage, emotional leverage, a contingency plan. If Britt resists, if she questions too much, if she tries to run, there is Nathan, a bargaining chip, or worse, an experiment connected to the same research. The idea that Britt's Huntington could be fake, completely fabricated, makes everything darker in hindsight. All her fear, all her resignation, all those quiet moments where she believed she was deteriorating might have been orchestrated. That is cruelty on a different level. Not just physical control, but psychological imprisonment stretching over years. And think about how long this manipulation would have to last since 2020, maybe earlier. That is not a short-term con. That is a life constructed around a lie. Britt planning her future, or lack of one, around a disease she might never have had. Some fans might argue this retcon would cheapen her past storylines, that it undermines the emotional weight. I get that concern, but I also think it could deepen it. Because instead of a woman tragically doomed by genetics, we get a woman systematically gaslit by a mastermind who understood her fears and weaponized them. There is something almost poetic, in a dark way, about Faison's daughter being manipulated through the very disease he carried, as if his shadow was extended artificially by someone who idolized him. And here is where my thoughts get messy. If Cullum needed Britt's genetic material for a specific phase of the project, then keeping her alive but dependent makes sense. You do not kill your golden goose. You sedate it. You convince it the cage is protection. Sidwell's role in all this still feels secondary to me. He might think he is a partner, but I suspect he is being used too. Cullum strikes me as the type who shares just enough information to keep allies loyal, but never the full blueprint. If Britt ever discovers that her Huntington was staged, I do not even know how she would process that. Relief, yes. Rage, absolutely. But also grief for the years she lost believing she was dying. That kind of betrayal does not just snap away. I personally think the fake Huntington angle is more compelling than a simple miraculous cure. A cure would be science fiction optimism. A fake diagnosis orchestrated by a disciple of Faison that feels very on brand for General Hospital. Dark, layered, morally disturbing. It also reframes Britt's entire relationship with her father's legacy. Instead of inheriting his disease, she inherited his enemies, his unfinished experiments, his chaos. And if Cullum truly is the architect behind both her illness and Nathan's return, then we are looking at a long game villain. Not loud, not theatrical, but patient. The kind that wins because no one realizes they are playing. I keep circling back to that first tremor. Was it real? Was it planted? Was it triggered by something she ingested without knowing? If Cullum had access to her medical records, to her blood work, to her environment, he could have engineered just enough evidence to make the diagnosis believable. And once you believe you are sick, your body almost cooperates. Stress amplifies symptoms. Anxiety creates new ones. The mind is powerful that way. Britt could have been trapped in a self-fulfilling spiral, all while Cullum adjusted the dosage to maintain the illusion. If this theory turns out to be true, it will not just be a twist. It will be a statement about control, about how fear can be manufactured and sustained. And in Britt's case, how the fear of becoming her father became the weapon used against her. I do not know where the story will go. Maybe the Huntington is real after all. Maybe Cullum's medication is legitimate experimental treatment. But my gut tells me there is something rotten underneath. The pieces line up too neatly. The dependency, the genetic angle, the secret project, Nathan as backup leverage. In Port Charles, death is flexible, science is malleable, and trust is a luxury. If Britt has been living inside a lie for years, I want to see her break free in a way that shakes Cullum to his core. Not as Faison's daughter, not as a victim of Huntington, but as someone who outsmarts the man who thought he was the smartest in the room. And honestly, that would be a comeback worth watching.